On September the 23rd, the Toronto Police Services Board launched this review to examine a number of matters relating to events both before and during the G20 Summit. This review will seek answers to questions such as whether the plans developed and implemented were adequate and effective for policing of the summit. Civilian oversight involves people outside the police force setting policies and priorities for police service and, at times, calling police to account for their actions. Public participation is an essential component of this review.
On behalf of my clients, I appeared on July 22, 2010 to make a submission to the Toronto Police Services Board that your inquiry should not be struck with respect. And I made that submission on behalf of my clients because I took the position at that time that the issue was very much about whether the Toronto Police Services Board was asleep at the switch, and there are others in a better position to review their conduct rather than having the board review themselves. What we have seen time and again in relation to the G20 events with respect is police officers of various backgrounds, various seniority, engaged in concealing their identities. Police officers who victimize members of the public, either through their leadership or directly, actually using their powers to re-victimize by charging, by prosecuting, or by engaging in smear campaigns. The conduct as reflected in individual officers, 90 of some who ripped their badges from their uniforms to conceal their identities, all speak to something that's reflected in a judgment by Justice Taylor. Quote, "This wall of silence is described in the affidavit of Joseph Martino, filed in support of the Special Investigations Unit position, as, quote, the confluence of certain aspects of police culture and peer pressure found in segments of the police community, which deters some officers from cooperating or being seen to cooperate with an investigation of a fellow officers for fear of being ostracized by their peers." The notion of a blue wall of silence is not only theoretical. It has entirely played itself out in the post-G20 investigations and inquiries. Make no mistake about it, this is not an individual issue, this is a systemic issue. The Police Services Board for the city has the responsibility for creating policy and actually making change. If there's a lesson to be learned from the unseemly exercise of cat and mouse that we continue to witness today, is there needs to be systemic change. There are many very good police officers in this city. There are many very good police officers in this province. They are done a disservice by this blue wall of silence. I urge you to make serious recommendations in this area. Thank you.
We determine the role civilian oversight will play right now by dealing with the police actions at the 2010 Toronto G20 Summit. There will be no confidence in policing unless we prove effective in exposing the truth, demanding answers into Canada's largest mass arrest in what has already been identified by groups like the Canadian Civil Liberties Association and the Ontario Ombudsman as the largest violation of Canadian Charter rights. My fiancée had her bra removed because the underwire might be used as a weapon. She was in handcuffs in a cage. The women had to form a wall around their washroom so male officers couldn't watch them go to the bathroom. Chief Blair has also admitted to hiding the truth about the Public Works Law, provided false evidence of weapons collected, accused victims of being violent and tampering with video evidence. And here, a major problem. He or someone he refuses to name ordered Toronto officers to stand down while vandals smashed windows and set cars on fire, then hours later arrested hundreds of peaceful civilians all over the city. This was either extreme cowardice, extreme stupidity, or done on purpose to justify the close to $1 billion budget. Any of those options is unacceptable, and we should not stand for it. This civilian oversight must hold police leadership to account, publicly, force Blair to answer who gave the orders, who is in charge of the detention center operations. These people do not deserve their jobs. They failed the people of Toronto and destroyed public trust of the police, and therefore they failed these police officers as well. Please, help me feel safe in this city again. Thank you.
The CCLA has long advocated for the creation of a mechanism for independently auditing police practices on an ongoing basis. The creation of an effective police audit mechanism would require giving independent civilian scrutineers the responsibility of monitoring and reporting on police policies, practices, and procedures on an ongoing basis. Auditors would require ongoing and unfettered access to police facilities, records, and personnel, and be charged with the responsibility of observing and reporting on how police conduct themselves, both in the major event context and beyond. With respect to the G20, we had many different police services that were in Ontario, and after the fact, from our experience dealing with members of the public, there was a great deal of confusion as to how you might complain about an officer you thought was from Calgary or Edmonton, and the level of detachment that I think occurs when somebody is dealing with a complaints process that may be several provinces away about an event that may, in this case, have happened in Ontario. So we would recommend that in advance of policing operations on this scale, there should be a police complaints body in place that's capable of kind of doing a one-stop shopping for police complainers and dealing with complaints against police from all jurisdictions.
The Police Services Act of Ontario clearly specifies what the role is of civilian oversight boards. Specifically, it's sections 31.1 through 31.7 of the Act. And if we're just here to establish a matter of fact, then you don't need to have a hearing about that. Now, I don't think all the people here are here for that purpose. I think the people here are here to actually talk about how the Police Services Board and the police force failed us. In 2006, the Police Services Board passed a very good motion. They said that the board direct the Chief of Police to ensure that December 31st, 2006 be the completion date for the implementation of the board's decisions respecting the mandatory wearing of name badges on the uniform of all members of the Toronto Police Service, and any necessary bylaws or practices be amended accordingly. Now, this is very unambiguous. It gives a completion date for this order, and it gives no room for loopholes. And yet, the practice on the streets of Toronto is completely different. And I'm going to show you a series of photographs here, and I'll give you copies of these photographs. These were all taken subsequent to the G20. This is at a protest in January of this year, a police officer without a name badge. The same protest, a different police officer, no name badge. In March of this year, a protest calling for police accountability. Officer Andrew Dobro, no name badge. In April of this year, the Toronto Slut Walk. I don't know who this officer is, no name badge. April of this year, I'm on a walk with my camera. I see a cop at a construction site, no name badge. There is a systemic problem with police officers following the orders of the Civilian Oversight Board, and that means that the chief, whose job it was to implement those orders, is disobeying orders. That is police misconduct. Peaceful protesters were seated in some cases, like the fellow in the top hat here, grabbed by police, dragged over concrete, arrested. The reason for the arrest is unclear. The reason for the violence against these peaceful protesters is absolutely unclear. And this is one that I didn't believe until I saw the video. Snatch and grab squads. Here we have a group of ununiformed police officers in plain clothes grabbing someone, throwing them into a black van, driving away with them. And in the second panel, it's hard to see here, but in the second panel you can see the person they grabbed. It's a young girl in purple tights. This is an image which I associate with the juntas of Chile, not with the police service in Toronto. Do we just sit around and ask questions like, next time, how are we going to make changes? Or do we use the powers that exist in the law right now to hold people accountable? And now if we go back to the Police Act says that a police board can hold the chief of police accountable. It can suspend the chief without pay, pending a hearing into his or her conduct. And massive charter violations are definitely misconduct. It can hold a hearing. It can prosecute the chief. If the chief is found to be guilty of misconduct, it can fire the chief. And that is what we should be talking about. How many of those 1,105 arrest records are like Adam Nobody's? How many of them bear a badge number for the arresting officer that doesn't exist? Because that's a very good indication that police were not intending to go through the criminal courts. They were intending to use arrest as a means of punishment. Police were trying to be the judiciary. That's a problem.
People are indignant why bankers should be bailed out with public funds while we should be paying with our pension checks, while money is squandered on needless wars that don't seem to end, and ecological catastrophes that are not curtailed. Those were what we as peaceful marchers were engaged upon, and it is, in my view, germane to ask, why was this message bypassed by, among other things, a flaming police car that was left to burn for no apparent reason for 2.5 hours? We know that $1 billion, where it came from. It came from the PMO. Is that a secret? When we see in yesterday's Star, out-of-town cops strike gold, these excesses of spending were encouraged, not at the municipal level where, in the same paper, we are now told the cop layoffs are viewed as a drastic alternative to the limited budget that we have at the municipal level. No, this bonanza of striking gold was encouraged at the very top. The number of arrests reminisce us to the 1970 War Measures Act, where a prime minister of this country tried to intimidate a nation within Quebec from its aspiration to independence. At the PMO level, we were subject to a mechanization, a machination is the right word, by CSIS and, among others, the provincial and the municipal, the lowest level of policing, to eclipse the message that the peaceful protesters had to convey. And that is the crux of the thing. And that is why we need to investigate this with nothing less than an inquiry of the stature of the MacDonald inquiry in the 80s that inquired into RCMP dirty tricks. And this is why, to echo an earlier speaker, Tommy Taylor, Chief Justice, help me feel safe, not just in this city, but in this country.
Why did the police also create a flashpoint on the corner of Queen and Spadina at 6 p.m. on Sunday? The same reason, again, those bicyclists were just continuing on to wherever they were going, whether it was Queen's Park or further down Queen Street towards Ossington or Dovercourt. Why again on the corner of Queen and Spadina? Who picked the corner of Queen and Spadina? Was it our alderman, our councillor? Was it the mayor? Was it the police chief? Was it higher up in the PMO? It's a question I just keep asking myself. If someone dresses up in a hooded black veil and breaks a window on Yonge Street, it's a misdemeanor. It's a $300 fine. It doesn't require any jail time. It's no reason to use a couple of broken windows in the city to suddenly have the biggest mass arrest in the history of Canada.
There's nothing better than, frankly, if you want to police a community, is the community policing itself. And the fact that, we are, relying so heavily on a police force which is, frankly, becoming more and more militarized, and that frightens me. When I look at the various kinds of equipment, the various weapons that they're prepared to use against the citizenry, it's really frightening, But more importantly, Your Honor, it seems to me that the process that you're engaged now will really, frankly, I don't have a lot of faith in it, that it's going to go very far. And frankly, I think that the real service you can give to the community basically is to, call for a public inquiry into the whole affair. I think, frankly, what should be investigated is not only the police, but the police services itself. If the service board you have already, or the civilian authority, really doesn't have the political will to do what you empower it to do, then nothing much more different is going to happen. It seems that there are various things you could do to bring that in. It seems that they basically stepped aside from what I'm seeing here is that you can justify anything in the name of security these days, in the name of anti-terrorism, and that's what's so frightening.
Any measures that might intrude upon the Charter-protected civil liberties should be subjected to the four-part Oakes test, as it's known, which is based on the 1986 Supreme Court Charter case, and is now a standard invoked often by privacy commissioners. That four-part test includes necessity, proportionality, effectiveness, and minimal intrusiveness. It's evident that the Toronto Police Service and its oversight body in this case failed to meet those standards. One of the few aspects of the strategy that was made public was the installation of over 70 surveillance cameras in the downtown area of Toronto. The signs that typically accompany those video surveillance cameras explicitly mention their purpose is, quote, to promote public safety and reduce crime. The experiences with these video cameras at the G20 vividly demonstrates the failure of this claim and this strategy. The great bulk of the vandalism occurred within the view of those cameras, so they clearly had little deterrent effect. Apparently no police were dispatched to protect the storefronts, so where is the reduction in crime? Nor were they effective in prosecuting the perpetrators. In looking at any further deployment of those, the civilian oversight body should ensure public hearings about this and other surveillance measures that we don't know about. One of the findings from this research that's relevant to this particular event, the G20, and the consideration of civilian oversight, was reported in a book called, just published last week, called The Surveillance Games, Surveillance and Control at Mega Events. And this was reports by scholars of surveillance looking at a series of large events, mega events, major events such as sporting events and G20s and G8s and of that kind. So while there may be egregious and unusual occurrences here at the G20, they also fit a much longer pattern that indicates a systemic or a systematic attempt to trend in increasingly aggressive police enforcement around mega events and seeing these events as occasions for experiments in monitoring people and places for the purposes of social control, generating exceptional conditions that eventually become new norms.
If over 700 of the people detained were not even suspected of a criminal offense, then that raises an eyebrow as to whether another detention center like that ever needs to be constructed in Toronto, and that should meet with scrutiny if it's raised. The other thing that needs to be more carefully supervised that absolutely was not properly done was making sure that people who are good candidates to be released from custody are released promptly, and if they are being held for a bail hearing, that happens right away. If we can make plans to arrest that many people and have enough space for them, then we know how many people we're going to need to transport to court. We know how many justices of the peace are going to need to be available, and the courts can be advised of that. There is no reason, if we're planning for mass arrest, that people should not receive their bail hearings right away. I'd like to just suggest that to the extent that this review may embolden the Police Services Board to be more proactive, it's very helpful, but we also absolutely need a public inquiry, and I'd like to reiterate the law union's call for that. There are aspects of this operation that will not come out any other way unless there is compelled sworn testimony.
I find it a shame that these bodies that we're always told to go to, these police oversight bodies, which I say are a complete facade. It's funny how Joe Warmington from the Toronto Sun, Rosie DeMano from the Toronto Star have essentially done their job. And what we've been saying from the get-go, from day one when all this happened, was totally ignored until someone that has like the ethos in the mainstream media comes forward and does their job, which, I mean, does the job of these policing bodies like the OIPRD and the SIU. It's a complete shame, and I just wish something can be done. And I'm really not sure. I'm an idealist, and I wish that something could be done. I believe that the panel here, in your honor, understands. I'm not sure what's going on in your minds right now, but I believe that you guys truly do know the injustices that took place and that you want to do something. I do believe that you would like to see something done about this, but I really wonder if this body that is set up here can actually have the power to actually demand the change that must take place. Thank you.
Thank you.
We just want to remind everybody that the next public hearings will be held at the same time as today's, about 5:30 to 9 p.m. The next one is Monday, June the 6th, this coming Monday, at the Etobicoke Civic Center, and then Monday, June the 13th, at the Scarborough Civic Center. We ask that you please continue to follow the progress of this review and access information on our website, www.g20review.ca, and you can also follow us on Twitter. Thank you again for your time this evening. Have a good night.